Hello, my name is Bruce Brinesman. I'm the founder of the Retirement Reformation. So I'm so glad that you're being part of our community and hopefully that you will become even more active in it. Today, we've got an important topic that we're going to talk about, and it has to do with the epidemic of loneliness and isolation that is affecting our country. So many of you who are part of our community have expressed issues related to that and in the desire for community and the pain that is felt. And if I let me just read a couple of comments that we received from you as we deal with this topic as a group and in our community. My husband passed away in August. It will be 3 years. And I still wish to talk with him in person, not just his soul, but will continue to talk to him. I was an autopilot for the first 2 years and had a stroke a week before he passed, and the next year, my second stroke. With one day at a time and one moment at a time, I moved forward. Now, 6 months later, maybe more, I have put some work into a few projects that we had been working on. This helped me to heal some. I've started walking and trying to eat right and live these days as God has given each of us. I pray for your peace and comfort. And the response from another member of our community to that said this: I'm so very sorry to hear about your loss. The pain of losing a loved one is incredibly profound, and it can feel like you're navigating an ocean of sorrow. It's completely okay to feel what you're feeling and to take time you need to grieve. Your feelings are a testament to the deep love you shared with your spouse. And then someone else added, there's a beautiful verse in Psalm 34:18 that reminds us, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. In these times of deep pain, know that you're not alone, and that there's a greater power that holds you close. We were impacted by two different things that prompted us to have this conversation. One is the comments made by so many of you as part of our Facebook group community. And if you're hearing this and are not part of the community, please join us and share your thoughts, your experiences, and that will have value to you and certainly have value to the community. Secondly, was that I found a place where I was kind of happy that my tax dollars were at work. And that place was, in fact, the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory on the healing effects of social connection and community. But the title was this: The Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation in the U.S. This report came out in the probably, I think it was the second week of May. So if you like a copy of it, and we're certainly going to pull some highlights from it and share them and use that to as a way to generate our thoughts, our conversations, and what we can learn from and with each other. But you can just go on to U.S. government or U.S. Surgeon General .gov and download a copy of it. It might be worthwhile you're doing that. But it was well done, well written, and so very appropriate to those of us that are of all ages, because you can be lonely when you're 15, but you can also be lonely when you're 65 and 75 and 85 and 95 and 105. And so the 30 years that we call retirement are times when we navigate through serious issues, some of them really difficult. And the net result may in fact be that feeling of loneliness. And so the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. So apparently, based on this, it's not just those of us who are Christ followers that feel that, but it is endemic to our whole society. And if you'll stay tuned next month, we'll be doing a broadcast on mentoring. And that mentoring broadcast will also help inform about some things that you can do about loneliness and isolation, and we'll talk more about that. But as I worked my way through it, I was impressed by a couple of things. First of all, just simply the chapter headings in this report. One is an overview and introduction to social connectedness matters. Let's talk about that for just a second. Why do they talk about social connectedness? Well, the opposite of loneliness is social connection. And one of the definitions and one of the applications of the idea of loneliness is not having social connections. And so that's where that gets interfaced. So how social connections impact individual health and well-being. You saw, I think, on the perhaps on one of the posts that we made in our community, where we did a quote from the report, which said that the health impact of loneliness is equal to the health impact, the negative health impact of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Man, when I read that, I thought, whoa, could that really be true? And apparently it really is true. So most of us, fortunately, are not smoking 15 cigarettes a day or any, but perhaps we have in the past, or we can visualize what that might be like, or we know someone who is. But that, in fact, if you put them on a scale, that loneliness and those 15 cigarettes will balance themselves out in terms of the negative impact on our health. We'll talk about that a little bit more. In chapter 4, he talks about the 6 pillars to advance social connection. So a national strategy to be able to come to conclusion about what do we do about this. And one of the reasons for us having this conversation today is to bring it into our consciousness so that that's a reality. The great number of circumstances where this is true and having such a negative impact. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we've learned and are continue to learn is that what we call the gray issues. As a matter of fact, in starting in September, if you'll pay attention to our podcast, we're going to do podcasts on the 4 gray areas. One of them is gray divorce, gray bankruptcy, gray suicide, and gray addiction. All things that stem from loneliness and are increasing in our community at just an accelerated rate. And we need to be aware of it and how we can help speak into it and make a difference. In addition, and then obviously a conclusion. So there's a little quote here at the end of the introduction that says, each of us can start now in our own lives by strengthening our connections and our relationships. So just take that as a thought for just a minute and mentally write down, what are 2 things that you can do that in fact will strengthen your connections or your relationships with who? With your spouse, with your kids, with your parents, with your neighbor, with your small group at church, with someone outside of yourself, where in fact you can make that very, very human connection and strengthen those relationships. One of the things that really amazed me is that in this report, he has a glossary, and as a matter of fact, it's a whole page of terms. And I was amazed about what I didn't know. I'm always amazed about what I don't know, and I'm always amazed about what it is that God shows me. And I go, oh my goodness. Matter of fact, I think in our community, we realize that if we stop learning and stop growing, we really are at the end. So as we continue to do that, but here's one that really got to me. And on this page, there must be 20 different terms that deal with isolation and loneliness or connectedness in some way. So I'm not going to go over all of them, obviously. We'd be happy to send them to you if you want it. You can do that. Oh, by the way, as we go along here, you're going to have some questions or some thoughts. Please just go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll recognize those and do our best to answer all the questions that you have during this time. And the ones we don't answer during this webinar, we'll answer or connect with you about them separately. So please do that so we can make this as interactive as possible. I just wanted to read off a couple of them for you. Matter of fact, why don't you go ahead and write down the U.S. Surgeon General's report and go online, Google that and download it, and then you can have. And so if you'll look in chat, you'll have the location to be able to do that. So let me just review with you just a couple of words that I just, that's interesting. I need to think about that. And one of them was empathy. I think as we grow older, oftentimes we get grumpier and we are less friendly and we are quicker to point out someone's mistakes or their errors or how you disagree with them or how dumb they are or whatever it may be. And so this capacity that has empathy plays a key role in our ability to connect with others and to stay connected. And so here's the short definition they did: the capability to understand and to feel the emotional states of others, resulting in compassionate behavior. Let me read that again. The capacity to understand, feel the emotional states of others, resulting in what? In compassionate behavior. And so one of the ways to be a person that others want to connect with is to be someone who is empathetic and can deal with that. Let me just pick up on a couple of others. So what is the definition of social connectedness? Social connectedness. It's the degree to which any individual or population might what? Fall along the continuum of achieving social connection needs. So social connectedness. The degree to which any individual or organization might fall along the continuum, which means to various degrees of achieving social connecting needs. That prompts the question, isn't it? What are the social connecting needs that you have? What are the social connecting needs that I have? What does that look like? And for me, it might be, a friend to watch the ball game with. That's a social connectedness needs that I have. A group to pray with. There's a social connected need that I have. And if I don't have those, in fact, I am in the process of both isolation and the result will be lonely. And there's a difference between being alone and loneliness, because some of us are more introverted than others, and we're comfortable with an hour or two by ourselves with a book or prayer or whatever it may be. And there are others that if there's not someone else around, they feel rejected. And so we're all along these different continuances. Now, social isolation, and here's their definition. Objectively, having few social relationships, special roles, group memberships, and infrequent social interactions. As we think about our community, one of the things we realize that as we grow older, what happens to our world? It grows smaller, doesn't it? It grows smaller, doesn't it? Our spouse dies. Our family moves away. Our kids are busy. And so our world continues to shrink. And as it shrinks, we turn inward. When we turn inward, the net result of that is going to be loneliness, because nothing good can come of that. And so, you can start to begin to get the ideas of what might be the solutions to loneliness. Finally, as I was just saying, it's called solitude, he calls it. A state of what? Aloneness by choice that does not involve feeling lonely. Yeah. When Judy and I travel together and I've got a meeting, she's very happy to be in a halfway decent hotel room and, read a book or study the Bible or do her group Bible study or whatever it may be. And she's just happy as a clam to do that, very comfortable. Other people might not indeed, but so realize again that we have that continuum. One last one here is social support. The perceived or actual availability of informational, tangible, and emotional resources from others, commonly one's social network. So how do you know if in fact you really cut yourself off? Is when in fact you don't have a social support network. And having one takes intentionality, taking actual steps to increase the number and the categories of people that you're involved with. And so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about myself, and one of the things that he says in the information here, it says that, social connection is a fundamental human need, as essential to survival as food, water, and shelter. I'm not sure that we've embraced that. I'm not sure that we understand that. I'm not sure that we're taking actions for that to, and as we get older and we get more reclusive, for some of us, it's a huge step for just simply allowing someone else to help us. The step of just allowing someone else to help us. And a number of my associates in the office here are kind enough, and just in case you're wondering, I'm 82, is that they'll say, "Can I get you a cup of coffee?" And how kind of them. 10 years ago, I said, absolutely not. I'll get coffee by myself. I don't need your help. But now I appreciate that cup of coffee. When someone says, you've got a box of stuff in the car, can I carry it in for you? 10 years ago, I had absolutely not. I'd almost take that as an insult. Now I go, yeah, and please do. And I've got 2 boxes, and hurry. And so, it's opening yourself up in new ways and recognizing reality. As a matter of fact, whenever we approach solving any problem, the first thing you got to do is understand what's true. Because if you're starting from a place where it's not true, where you're going to end up is going to be a catastrophe. So figuring out what's true. Well, at 82, I can't do what I did at 62 or 42 or certainly 22. And to the degree that I feel less than because of that reality is the degree to which I am going to cut myself off and be more lonely. To the degree that I accept that reality and say, all right, that's what I can't do, but what can I do? What can I do more? And we talk about that when we go together through the workshop of Recreating Retirement, which is designed to help us walk through and understand how God has prepared us uniquely for what's next and figuring out what's next. But one of the things we talk about in there are what are the positive benefits of longevity. I'm not going to take you through them here, but ask you to join us or read the Retirement Reformation or help your church or your group to be able to have an Oxygen for Life event where we'll lay those out. But there are definite benefits to longevity, not just the downhill slog that our culture says that it is. In the report, they talk about the 3 vital components of social connection. The 3 vital components of social connection, and lays them out in a really nice way. As I say, it's okay with me that my tax dollars have been spent to create this. And those 3 areas of social connection, one of them is what they call structure. So this is, and think through yourself, the structure of your social world, the world in which we live in together. The structure is the number and variety of relationships and the frequency of interaction. So the number of variety in relationships and the frequency of interaction. When I was 8 years old, I met Chuck. And Chuck and I, for all of our growing up years, did almost everything together. And so Chuck and I have been friends now for 70 years. And he's an important part of my social structure. However, Chuck lives in Michigan, and I live now in Colorado. And so we probably talk a couple of times a year. And when I get to Michigan, we go visit and we pick up from where we were. So we do not have the frequency of interaction that we obviously once had. But it is a variety because his political leanings and the way he looks at life and so on and so forth are quite different than mine. So I always learn something from him. So he is a part of my social structure. So household size and the size of our circle of friends and the marital partnership status are all part of our structure. Then secondly is function. The degree to which the social relationships that I have serve the various needs that I have and maybe for those who I care for. And so the three examples that they give there is one is emotional support, second is mentorship, and support in a crisis is the third. The third area, so we got structure, we got function, we got quality, the positive and negative aspects of relationships and interactions. So, how many of you have a toxic relationship with somebody? I'd say probably 75 to 80% of us have a toxic relationship, and we allow that relationship to influence us perhaps more than the combination of all the other relationships that we have. Here's my advice to you, and let me just do a little mentoring. Break off the relationship. A toxic relationship is not something that is going to be. On the other hand, before you break it off, reach out to them and say, I'd really like to have a different kind of relationship with you. Odds are they're going to turn it down, and then you can break it off, but make that attempt. So relationship satisfaction, relationship strain, and social inclusion or exclusion, as that may be. So let me go back to the functional one and the degree to which relationships serve various needs. I have sitting with me today a friend, and he happens to be an expert in the area of mentoring. And next month, you will see a full hour conversation that we've had on the subject of mentoring. But I'd like to introduce you to Peter Vanacore. And Peter, it says here that the degree to which relationships serve various needs, and one of those is mentoring. Why do you think that's true?
Mentoring serves two people's needs at the same time. So it's the mentor is helping someone else. It doesn't matter the age, but my focus has been a lot on youth and young adults. And that youth or that young adult or even that older person really benefits by having someone who shows they care for them, shows that they are important and that they have value in that person's eyes, and hopefully learn that they have value in God's eyes at the same time. And the other part is that the mentoring helps the mentor, and at least in as much as the mentee, if the mentor is open to that, if the mentor is open to receiving, and the real good mentors know that they will learn as much as they give in that relationship.
One of the interesting that we talked about in our conversation that you'll have available here next month, but we talked about that learning the skills of mentoring and opening yourself up to the empathetic relationship, the caring relationships, and the understanding and appreciation for someone else's worldview are open to all of us. And I really believe that in our retirement reformation community, that these are skills and abilities that will serve us all extremely well and will help us. And so one of the focuses that we're going to have in the retirement reformation going forward is in this whole area of mentoring. So stay tuned and see. But it's so what we see is that when in fact, not only perhaps we can be the mentee, but also I think as importantly for our conversation, and as it relates to loneliness, being open to being a mentor, because you're coming alongside of someone else. that's getting us out of ourselves and into and with someone else. And that removes the isolation, which is the physical aspect, and then the emotional aspect of loneliness, which is there. So social connection, structure, function, and quality. And so you might be doing your own little inventory of where are you in that? And I think for some of us, we will go through our own personal inventory and we'll go, oh my goodness, my social network is small and shrinking. And then you have a decision to make. Knowing the negative impacts of that, then what steps are we going to take to, in fact, expand our social network to fill our needs? And mentoring is one of those steps that you can take. So thank you, Peter, for that. There's another spot in the report where they talk about the factors, the individual elements that can shape our social connections. So it's really kind of in what areas and how can we think about the fact that, if we identify that loneliness is that emotional issue is where we are because of our circumstance or whatever it may be, that what are the different areas that we can in fact impact and where that impact us. And so the different elements, the factors that can shape our social connection. And one of them is our individual circumstance, our individual DNA of the way that God created us. And so some of us are more comfortable in being alone. Some of us never want to be alone. That's a DNA and a difference. And so realizing what is true about us as individuals. And as a matter of fact, when we go through the process in recreating retirement, we help each other to identify what those factors are that have created us and are the drivers for us in our social interactions and in what God has prepared us and is calling us to. So our individual characters. Second is our relationships. And so the household size, the characteristics and behaviors of others, the empathy with which we connect with people and people connect with us, social structure, and so on. So who are we, the relationships we have, and then the community within which that we exist. And this is one of the key roles of the Retirement Reformation, to give each one of us one more place, a place, and maybe the only place for some of us, where in fact we can find community and we can begin to realize the value that we have in that community, and that then we can then extend to the rest of our culture and to the rest of our community. For what reason? Well, God calls us to be what? Efficient, effective, and proud? Probably not. It's more to be fruitful, relational, and to be a model. And so as we learn to be fruitful, which is to bring impact into others' lives. Secondly, as we learn to how to build relationships. And then as we become a model to who? Everyone who sees us. And so what does that model look like? So how we act and how we engage in community. And the community has lots and lots of pieces to that, and it's different for all of us. And then we have the further area of what they identify as society. How are we impacting with our culture? Well, I think most of us would agree that our culture is going south, and short of God's miracle, it's not going in a good direction. But who is it that has the opportunity to impact that direction? Well, from a Retirement Reformation standpoint, it would be the 40 million of us that are Christ followers that have an opportunity to be able to step into what he has called us to do. When we do that, what in fact happens is that we are not isolated. We are part in having an impact on our society or on our culture. And so I would ask you to continue to think about your role in God's mosaic of his kingdom. in what role that you play, and then to invite others. It may be a sibling, a brother, a sister, maybe someone at church, to invite them into the community together so that together we can understand how, in fact, that God uniquely calls each one of us, that we can have an impact. When we have an impact, that fills that hole in our soul, which is then looking for meaning and purpose. Just to remind us that we know that either total isolation or major leisure activities will not fill that hole. They will fill our time, but they will not fill that hole, because the hole is filled when in fact we have meaning and purpose. And leisure certainly has value, no question about that. But it does not have meaning and purpose. Some of you are going, well, I don't know if I really want meaning and purpose. Well, let me just challenge you to let me challenge you to do this. Read through the book of John in the Bible. Once you do that, read it again. Then sit back and say, what is it about being fruitful that Jesus thought was important for us and for his kingdom? And if your answer to that is nothing, then read it again. If your answer to that is, oh my goodness, he has uniquely prepared me for something, but I don't know what it is, then join our retirement reformation community to help you to be able to go through the process of understanding of how to step into God's preferred future for yourself. When you step into God's preferred future for you, those issues of isolation, loneliness, they go away. For the woman, the story that I read for you, will she ever lose the pain of loss of her husband? My guess would be no. But that she can also build on that pain and loss and ask the question, what would her husband have her do? And what is she now have the opportunity to do that they didn't do, or they didn't do together, or they didn't realize? And so to be able to take the pain and be able to bring benefit from it. I received a note from a friend of mine the other day, and here's what he wrote me. He said, one of the saddest retirement stories I have ever heard was told to me today. And it was by a financial planner whose physician client had committed suicide only 45 days into retirement. So, financial planner's client, he was a physician, and he had committed suicide 45 days after he left his practice. He had left a note that read this: 45 days ago, I was Dr. Smith. Today, I'm nobody. Wow. Wow. The ultimate of loneliness, the ultimate of isolation. Was that true about his life? I don't know if it was true or not, but it was certainly his perception. And that perception took him to take a dramatic action. 45 days ago, I was Dr. Smith. Today, I'm nobody. One of the reasons why that strikes home so closely is that in the hundreds and hundreds of those that are in the transition from career into retirement, or in a few cases from one stage of retirement to the next, but in that transition, that liminal period, and we can talk about that some more. But during that liminal period, when we ask them, what are you going to do in retirement? The answer of an overwhelming majority is nothing. When you are nothing, you are nobody. You see the connection and the sadness of that, and that nobody or nothing leaves that hole in your soul to not only exist, but become more painful, and to squeeze you until you feel like there's nothing left. And some of you are exactly at that spot. So we would encourage you to take a step of awareness. It doesn't have to be this way. That God does have a plan for my life, that there is meaning and purpose, and that there's a community that I can join that wants to encourage you to help provide options and alternatives and pathways for you to explore what that meaning and purpose is all alike. A few months ago, when we talk about leisure, Judy and I were in Africa, and we were in Tanzania. And we stopped and spent half a day with a Maasai tribe. And our guide during that day with the Maasai tribe, those are the long, tall, skinny guys with the shields and the sword. You've seen them all. But they are shepherds, and they are nomadic. They move every 3 years. And so our kind of our guide in that tribal conversations that we were having was one of the sons of the head of the tribe. And so as he explains their culture and their circumstance and all the things that they do, it's kind of fun to watch because they think that jumping is one of the keys to spiritual growth. And so they jump really, really well. Kind of weird, and it's certainly a different culture, but I haven't tried it because I can't jump very high anymore. So not sure what to do that. But at any rate, as we're closing up our time together, the tribal leader's son came to me, and he gave me this, and I said, "So what is this?" He says, "This is the chief of the tribe's symbol of their power to be able to make decisions and lead the tribe." And he sensed that you have that kind of a role, and he wanted to give me his symbol. Let me pass this symbol on to you, that in fact you have the power and the ability to be able to deal with the loneliness, fear, anxiety, frustration, whatever it may be in your life, through not the power of this wand, but the power of your relationship with God and the power of the Holy Spirit guiding you in this process. And so, Peter, let me turn to you and just say, for the people, and you have a sense of the widespread feelings of isolation and so on that exist amongst our 40 million Christ followers who really are doing nothing. And as you think about that, as you're 69?
I'm 68.
Let's don't add it any more than you want. And we'll be 69. That's a guarantee. And as you are working your way through, and as you're thinking about these kinds of issues and how mentoring plays a role, but maybe even a little broader perspective, what words of wisdom or words of insight from your experience would you share with our community?
Some of it's pretty simple, and it's a lot of what you've talked about. But I look at the people that I know who have retired and have aged and some gone to be with the Lord, the ones that were the most fulfilled, the most joyful, who added to everyone else's life as they added to their own by being involved. What I saw is they were willing to give of themselves in different ways. My wife and I, Diane and I, have friends who their thing in retirement has been working with Habitat for Humanity. And they go and they're both very talented at it. They don't want to put me in that role, okay? But they can build houses, they can do construction without a problem. And they have a network of people that they do that with. And they actually go and they caravan and meet up and will work on projects together. they are totally fulfilled in their retirement, and they actually stay healthier because of that in every way, physically, mentally, but spiritually also, and they're filled with joy. I mentioned to you early today about a friend of ours. She was in her 80s and dedicated woman. She was living in an independent living retirement situation. And she mentored kids and young adults
And
regularly.
how old is she? Was she
Like, she was in her 80s.
in her 80s?
Yeah, and she some of them she would just help with reading or just read to them. Some of them she would just talk to. Some of them needed just guidance on what to do with their future. But she was constantly mentoring people. And because of that, there was a fulfillment and joy in life that she could not get any other way. And she died at 87. Um, she was mentoring right before she died. She just went into her bed one night, put her Bible next to her, reading her Bible, and went to be with the Lord. That was a fulfilled life. But she didn't see her retirement as something as just, I mean, she did lots of fun things. She had family, she had grandchildren, she was seeing all the time. It was, but she saw it as of giving of herself uh, for really for their sake, for the kingdom of God's sake, and to really fulfill the purpose God had put into her life.
So her fruitfulness was evident in the impact on others' lives and the fulfillment that she did. So this idea of fruitfulness and impact, I think, is an important concept for our community to grasp, that we measure value and we measure success by the impact that we have in others' lives. As a matter of fact, I've always defined ministry as being involved in others' lives. And we are all involved in ministry. And we are called to be ministers how long? Until we die. As a matter of fact, when our usefulness is over, we will die, and our usefulness will never be over until God chooses that time for us to do. And it may be 75, it may be 85, it may be 95, or in my case, 104. So that's the benefit that we're looking at. Well, Peter, thank you for that sharing. I wanted to share with our audience one of the ways that we can mentor others for generations to come is by leaving a legacy of relationship, a legacy of model. And here's another way. This is the Bible that I have here in my office, and the name of it, it's a New King James Version, and it's the Woman's Study Bible. And so why in the world would I have the Woman's Study Bible as my key Bible here in my office? The reason is this was my mother's. And so when I go to a subject or go to a passage, and I often go through, Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, the wisdom books, or pray through the book of Psalms, invariably there's a note that my mother has written.
Wow.
And so she has left a legacy, and she died, 15 years ago. But her legacy lives on with me in that way. As a matter of fact, there's a good friend of mine who reads through a chronological daily Bible every year and makes copious notes in the margins of what he thinks or what he responds to or ideas that come. It's got writing all over it. And every year he takes that one and he gives it to one of his grandchildren. So he is leaving his legacy, like my mother, she didn't know it, but was leaving a legacy with me. And then he starts with a new one and goes through that for the year and makes his notes and so on. And so that, in fact, he leaves a legacy with that grandchild. I believe those Bibles will be passed on from generation to generation. I can't imagine one of those grandchildren not passing that on to his son or his daughter, and they passing it on to his son and his daughter, so that the impact of his life and on his life by the Holy Spirit as he engaged with God's word will be living and will be sharper than a sword, and will have content that will leave that legacy. So let me share with you one of the steps you can take if you're part of our community that is feeling that oppressive loneliness. Get a new Bible, get a dark pen and a highlighter, and go through that Bible and highlight and write what it is that God is saying to you. Again, I would urge you to start with the book of John, even though that's not chronologically, although in some chronological Bibles it is. In the beginning was the Word. And so go through and just do that and open yourself up to what the Spirit is saying to you and what Jesus is saying to you today, remembering that some of the key words that he said in John 16:15 is what? You did not choose me, but I chose you. What an honor, what a privilege, what a blessing. And I chose you and I prepared you to bear much fruit that will last. And so as you come across those kinds of admonitions, those kinds of affirmations, those kinds of promises, know that God's word will come through, and that in fact he has prepared you for something more. Our job is to discover that together and then to step into it. And so as we do that, again, that takes a major step of filling that hole in our soul. And so as we think about the issues of loneliness and isolation, I think we can be encouraged that we don't need to be stuck there. That in community and with information and affirmation and connection with God's wisdom through his Holy Spirit, that we can navigate our way through that period and into a new light of freedom and joy that we won't experience in any other way, that we'll be able to embrace some leisure and just enjoy it totally, and then to be refreshed to step back into what it is that God has called us to do. At least in my life, being in his will in that way is the most energizing thing that I can have. It's when I roll out of bed in the morning and my feet hit the floor, I'm glad they did. Number one, I'm affirmation that I'm still here. And second, that he's not done with me yet. And third, that I got some stuff to do, and that what that stuff is it will have meaning and purpose and will be fruitful. So let's agree to join together that we are going to be a band of fruit fillers, of fruit pickers and fruit deliverers to our culture, to our family, to our family's generations, and maybe it's just to our neighbor next door. Thank you for joining us today. I would urge you to go and take a look at the Surgeon General's report. There's lots more information there that will, I think, both inform you, in some ways shock you. But when you think about it through God's perspective, we have the opportunity to speak into that and to be able to bear fruit in so many more people's lives. So with that, God bless, and till next time.